Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Don't Keep Your Day Job. I'm Kathy Heller. I'm so happy to be here with Natasha Case.
Excited to be here too.
It's so cool, literally cool, no pun intended, what she has created in her life. How many of you, show of hands, I'm just kidding, you're not here, but how many of you know about Coolhaus ice cream sandwiches? Natasha knows. She gets a car. Awesome. So we're going to talk about how she built this incredibly sparkly, delicious, successful company. But you had a life before that.
Yeah.
You were an architect?
I was an architect in design. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I definitely had a day job.
You had a day job. Let's talk a little bit about your journey, how you got to be Natasha Case, running this business. And like sort of what the journey looked like to get here.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, it's definitely not the normal story for ice cream lady, from architecture to ice cream lady, you know, everyone does that. No, like one of us,
right.
Maybe ever.
Pretty standard, yeah.
I think for me, like the light bulb kind of inspiration moment that started to take me in this direction was in an architecture studio, actually. A professor criticized a scale model I had made, saying it looked like a layer cake. And I was like, why is that a bad thing? Layer cakes are delicious. So I baked the next iteration of the model as a cake. And I had so much more fun doing that. Like that was pretty much my only all-nighter in all of architecture school. Because I just it was just such a blast. I was thinking I would always be more interested in, you know, cake as the material instead of balsa wood. And then when I presented it to my colleagues the next day, there was just such a different level of engagement with like this model made of cake. You know, they're probably thinking when she's done yapping about it, do we get to eat it? And you know, if you ask people, what do you remember from a design studio? That is memorable. Like that brings people together. And I could just see everyone's guard was like down, you know? And I had been searching for a way to make architecture and design more fun and accessible. And even in speaking with you briefly, you know, before this, it seems you're on the same page. You like to, it's about inclusion and opening up the dialogue and not having this like intimidating bubble that people feel like they can't access. So that was very much on my mind. And for me, it was like, this is it. Like food will make architecture more fun and digestible for people. So I was like, okay, that's a thing I'm interested in, but I didn't know what it meant exactly. So through the rest of architecture school, and I went to grad school as well, so I have a master's degree in architecture, I just kind of played around on the side with this whole food meets architecture intersection, started calling it farchitecture. And it was just like high concept dinner parties, different like products. It was an art project, you know? And
so cool.
It was really fun. It was wild. And it took years of like fermenting, literally, you know, and marinating what this would be.
Love how you keep using these food words, digestible, fermenting, marinating. Yeah. What were some of these things you were making, experiences you were gathering together? Like what did that look like for architecture?
Okay, so I'll tell you one, for example. I had this like pizza making party, but part of it was like the tablecloth was basically like an architectural plan for like what would happen throughout the night. It was like I like designed like a line drawing, like here's where so-and-so is going to spill their wine, or someone forgot their wallet here, or it was like, you know, taking an architectural planning idea and being like, well, what if that was like somehow related to the course of the events of the evening? And then we made the pizzas and they were delicious, but then I basically like canned the tomato sauce from that event and did this whole special custom label where instead of like the ingredients, it said the directions or the details for the next party on the can of tomato sauce. So it was like also about preserving the energy from the one night, and you know, so it was like all these wild things. Yeah, and it was like really just so fun to do this. It was just purely for fun, you know, on the side. Or I had this other one that was a dinner party called Your Place Mat. So when everyone showed up, they had a placemat of where they were from. So when they set it up on the table to eat, it was supposed to be like a conversation starter. Like, oh, you're from there, I didn't know. Like, I have family born there too. And then you got to keep like this relic of the evening. So it was just like very
And you were just
concept.
doing this because you wanted to do these fun, engaging things. You weren't being paid to throw together this like placemat party.
No, I was probably losing money doing it.
You were following a thread of something that was calling you.
Exactly, and it was about personal satisfaction because I just found it so fun. And I think part of, if you're going to be in food or hospitality in any way, you're definitely the type of person that also enjoys the other person's satisfaction. Like, I could see people were really having fun being part of this, and that also kind of gave me a personal
who wouldn't have fun doing that?
Right.
It's so alive. It makes me think of something that happened recently. I went to hear Sir Ken Robinson. Do you know who he is?
No, actually.
He has the #1 most watched TED Talk, and it's on
I gotta
how
check this out.
schools kill creativity. And Wayne Gretzky was with him, and they were doing a Q&A about what does it take to become a genius. And what you were just saying is really what they were trying to put into words.
Wow.
This idea that what happens is you start out as a child feeling an instinct, noticing things that you enjoy, and playing. You do a lot of playing, and there's a lot of messiness. You know, you don't meet a kid who's playing with art that's got clean hands at the end, which is a good thing.
Totally.
And then what happens is you're getting so much input from teachers and parents and adults and other people.
Yeah.
And you start to look at things through their lens. And you start to be in, like you said earlier, inside of this bubble, inside of this one paradigm, and you stop looking for solutions out here.
Yeah.
And so Wayne Gretzky was talking about, like, he's undeniably the best hockey player of all time, and those that are great today still don't touch his records. Like, that's how great he was.
Wow.
So he talked about how he as a child would watch a hockey game, and while everybody's watching the hockey game, he would have a sheet of paper out, and with a pencil or a pen, he would be doodling, just watching the puck on the ice and where it was going.
Oh my God.
And then at the end,
So interesting.
because of the doodle, he would see where on the rink the ice was the most.
Wow.
And he would notice, like, it spends the most time over here.
Wow.
So then he would go out to play, and his approach was completely unique. He wasn't thinking about what the coach was saying and the goal and this. He had his own way of looking at this from a different view.
It was like very three-dimensional, like thinking of it.
And so he would always score and score and score. And he wasn't the heaviest weight, the biggest bodybuilder. He wasn't the fastest.
Yeah.
But he could see where the puck was.
It's like thrilling to hear about.
When it is thrilling. And when you were just describing that entire journey and how that unfolded, that's where you still step into reality from where you see it. You're not stuck in, well, this is the way most people are living, and this is the way most people brainstorm, and this is the solutions most people have.
Right.
And within that is where I have to figure out my life, my path, my job. So then you're just following this thing, and then you're like making these incredible parties, or you're wrapping a can of tomato sauce in directions for a party, and then preserving the energy because that felt good.
Totally.
That's why I wanted to stop and highlight this, because we have to get back to this place. We have to get back to this place of discovery and not being inside this lane that other people carved for us.
Absolutely.
Because we have the ability, right, to think outside. So what happened next? Because we know where it's leading. And it's leading somewhere really cool. So tell us what happened next.
So I think beautiful points. And I think what's cool is I think that, as you said, there's no one path and you can start from very different places. So I was definitely starting from this place of, like, you know, the being an artist about it, or having pure creativity, and I think letting an idea really grow and foster. And so this, as I said, went on for quite a few years. I think maybe like 4 or 5 solid years of just playing. And then my first real job was Disney Imagineering, which was amazing. And apparently it's extremely, like, when people say what they would want to be, it's like a lot like rocket scientists, like that's in like the top 5, which is like, it speaks to the world that they've created, which is phenomenal.
I don't really want to ask, because I feel like this would be an entire podcast in itself, but how you got that job is probably, like, it's fascinating. That's like getting into Harvard. But like if Harvard had like a special creative school just for 20 people who applied to Harvard, it's like that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good cross section of different like skill sets in that way. I will say that just as a little nugget of that I did win a scholarship to go to college, a Disney scholarship. So when I interviewed there, I told them, I'm literally your investment. You've invested in me and my education. You should bring me into the workforce. And I have to say that probably did.
Okay.
But it was a really cool experience, because I kind of compare it to like a lot of tech entrepreneurs, starting at like a Google, for example, you cut your teeth on, how things are done and how teams are built and how products are built and all those things. And then often people kind of take a lot of that kind of core, learning and apply it to a much more like startup entrepreneurial,
right.
So to me, Disney is like that for creatives because they are, and very much for entrepreneurs, but they are master storytellers and they create stories and characters that people spend their whole lives worshiping.
100%.
So it was a great place to be. However, a few months after I started, the recession hit. So this is fall 2008. So it was, dark days at the office, and I would say architecture and design was hit quite hard in that recession because it's connected to real estate and it's connected to things like that.
And it's the luxury, it's the icing on the cake. It's
right,
the
maybe people
added
say,
elements, you don't need it.
On the, exactly. This project could be put on hold. So a lot of people started getting, laid off. And to kind of lighten the mood at the office with my food meets architecture concept, which I was now calling farchitecture. I started baking cookies, making ice cream, naming the combinations punnily after architects. So, someone had gotten bad news, I'd say like, I'm sorry to hear, but here's a Frank Berry, which was a snickerdoodle strawberry, or here's a mintimalism, double chocolate dirty mint, Mies Vanilla Row, and they would sort of like laugh amidst the tears. And that's really kind of what it was for a few weeks. And then I met the other founder, Freya Streller. And we're now actually married and have a son, so we'll get to that. But
she's really a soulmate.
Yeah, truly partner in all ways. And she saw the business potential, I think, in this crazy, ironically, what she called elitist ice cream sandwiches. Because my whole goal is to make architecture not elitist, but it's still architectural ice cream. There's maybe an elitism there. She's not wrong. So she was like, you're making this product, like, what's your cost per unit? And I was like, I went to Whole Foods and spent $80, and she was like, okay, we're gonna go and write down what everything cost. I was like, oh, who is this girl? She's so annoying. But of course now I love that kind of stuff. And she really, I think, it was the convergence of the two of us who had such a different and wide-reaching set of skills when combined, but we're aligned in this vision that like, we're gonna do something really big. We're gonna change the game. We're gonna create an ice cream brand that is something so much for our generation and for women. Like we went in the ice cream aisle, we're like, we don't feel represented like on the shelf here. Let's do something for us and people like us, and make it feel like.
It's amazing that you're like thinking about evoking somebody's empowerment and social change through ice cream.
Yeah.
Like, again, where's the solution?
Yeah.
Maybe it's not over here. Maybe it's an ice cream.
I think it solves a lot of problems.
I mean, think about that. It's so cool. Like, I didn't anticipate that you were going to say what you just said. We want to be represented. We're gonna find our representation through ice cream. Keep going. Yeah. It's so cool.
No, I think that's the thing. That's a common theme. It is so much bigger than the product represents something so special, but it's about what it represents in a way.
Yeah.
So anyway, we came together. We said, it was sort of like this feeling, and I don't think we necessarily had as clear of the words at the time, but it was sort of like, let's be the Ben and Jerry's of our generation kind of thinking, except we're Freya and Natasha. And we kind of like did the basics on the business, started developing the recipes, and we said, we've got to really think of how we're going to take this to market. And since the recession had just hit, there was no way we were going to get, a loan for a brick and mortar, let's say. We were 25 years old. We basically had, very limited credit. We were both living at home. We like to say like we were losers, but nothing wrong with living at home. It's a great way to save money. But we had nothing. That's what made it work.
How long ago was this? How many years ago?
10 years.
Okay.
Almost 10 years. And we didn't understand grocery yet either. That was not really an option. But we saw how kind of the social media connected, chef-driven mobile food was starting to, people were taking note. And we thought we could be the pioneering ice cream truck of our generation. We Googled hipster ice cream truck, nothing comes up. Like literally there was like a truck that sold like records. And that was it. We're like, we have to do this. Like the parting of the clouds, the zeitgeist, everything it felt very special and magical in that moment. Like we must act, And so
I love it.
said, let's get a food truck. What's our budget? It was my personal credit card with a $5,000 limit. I don't know why my card and not Freya's, but it's all right. It's all good.
We gotta go home and talk about that.
But we found a beat up postal van on Craigslist for $2,900. It was really a POS, but it did have chrome rims. That's basically what we were paying for. No engine. We tow it to LA. And we say, we need a really big event to launch at. Like, where are we going to get this in front of as many eyeballs as possible?
I'm drooling over this. This is so much fun
Maybe
to
you need
listen
ice
to. It's just so great. Okay, so go ahead.
So then we said, okay, like the biggest event we can possibly think of, where it's the most like culturally cool, our audience, people who this will resonate with, let's take it to Coachella Music Festival. So we begged and begged them to let us sell there. They literally just got so annoyed with us that they were like, stop emailing us, you can sell in the campground. You're very, very annoying. You know, we were so persistent. So the morning of Coachella comes, you remember the truck doesn't drive, so how did we get there? Well, we had figured out that if we join AAA Platinum, we get one free 200-mile tow. And so we call up AAA, they come out, they tow us to Coachella, and that is how Coolhaus began.
You must love this story. Looking back, you're like, every aspect of that story is the most perfect story to tell.
It's very fun.
So what happens when you get there?
We get to Coachella, and I mean, it was.
How did you know how to outfit an old postal van? Like, did you get like
I don't know if we
fridge?
Did. Yeah.
Were you just in the window, like,
it was
here,
like
it's melting,
most
take it quickly?
basic,
Like,
minimum viable product. Like, the truck actually ended up being kind of like the aspirational icon. Like, it was like sitting there, and next to it we had a booth because the doors of the truck we couldn't even really open; they were too rusty, and there were like bars on the windows. It didn't say Coolhaus. We had nothing. We had nothing to spend. We had, you know, there was no budget. Like, we spent it all on making some ice cream.
So what was inside it?
So the truck just was sort of there. I feel like people like charged their phones in it. Maybe someone slept there, and I don't know. But like, it just sort of was like, here's what we want to be.
There was a fridge in there with ice cream?
And then there was a booth next door that we scooped from, that we had like a chest freezer and like a couple tables for the cookies. And it was
so you didn't really need the
minimum.
truck.
It was to show people what we were going for, you know?
Okay.
And I think people then could make the connection post Coachella. Like,
yeah.
But minimum viable product to the extreme. And that was good though, because people were like, oh, were you stressed, or were you like, you know, like what were you worried? And the truth was like, no, because it was sort of, we had nothing to lose. It was, let's see how this, see how this pans out, and if it works out, great, you know, but if not,
okay, so what happened?
So we basically like built kind of a mini cult following at Coachella. People were excited about what we were doing, and you know,
was it called Coolhaus already?
It was called Coolhaus, and we started scooping the sandwiches to order like we still do on the trucks and in the shops, and we would have also friends who had we traded tickets to the concert to like help us. I don't know what they really did, but they supposedly went to all the tents in the campground and like tried to sell the sandwiches from little cooler bags. It was very not, you know. I don't really stand by any of the setup of the operation.
You were starting it.
We're
just trying to
figure
it out. Yeah.
And but I would they would wake me up at like 7 a.m. and be like, Natasha, there's a line for the ice cream sandwiches. You know, like before I was even awake, people wanted them. So it was just the microcosm we needed. It was enough to know we've got something.
You validated the idea.
Exactly. It was proof of concept.
How'd you get that truck home?
So common question. Because we spent so little getting there, we started cash flowing right away. And so we got a real insurance policy, and then we, you know, used that to tow the truck back. So we were towing the truck back, and you know, coming back to LA. A friend of mine who wrote for Curbed at the time, the real estate blog, he said, if it goes well, send me a logo and the details, and I'll do a piece on Coolhaus. So I was like, yeah, we've got the proof of concept to keep going. I'm gonna send Dan you know, an image of a logo, shameful for an architect, not even a vector-based file. It was like, you know, and the basics, I was like, here's the details. And he wrote this piece that was like actually not even flattering at all. He was like, you know, if you're really bored in LA and you want something weird, there's this architecture ice cream truck, like maybe if you have time, check it out. I was like, thanks, Dan, that's super helpful. But it didn't matter, it just shows. It totally went viral. Like, in coming home from Coachella, I was getting calls from like LA Magazine, LA Times, Dwell, Apartment Therapy reposted it. Meanwhile, Freya, we had set up a Twitter account, you know, in advance, thinking, okay, if this takes off, like we have somewhere to collect people. And her phone had died, and she turned it on, and she called me and she said, I think we've been hacked because we're getting a new follower literally every 2 and 3 seconds. And I was like, no, that's real, because I'm getting all these calls from editors. So within 24, 48 hours, it was like 5 to 10,000 followers. It literally blew up. And if so few brands will have the literal luxury of like what you're doing going viral, it is like a phenomenal, it's so rare and you can't plan for it. You just have to like be like, you know, hold on and wow, like this, we're really being given an opportunity to do something here. Like,
it's so magical. It's so sparkly. And I love that my friend Emily McDowell, who you probably know and love, and if you don't, you will. Yeah, she's amazing.
She's awesome, yeah.
We had her on the show.
Oh, cool.
And she said, all you need to be successful is a vision of where you're wanting to get to and just a place to put your right foot, like the next step.
Yeah.
And this is a glorious example of that, where like you did the minimum viable thing that you could possibly think to do, and then your friend Dan's like, okay, I guess I could write about that experience, which then leads to so much.
Yeah, right. It was one foot in front of the other.
And you never would know that how.
No.
Nobody can give you that.
No.
That like, here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna make a left turn, then you're gonna call this person, then you're gonna call AAA, then you're gonna get an old beat up thing, then you're gonna, but by just following this sort of feeling, look what happens.
Yeah.
It's so like hidden in plain sight. It's like right there.
Yeah.
So
well said.
So what happened next?
So we're back in LA. It sort of felt like a wag the dog moment, to be honest, because we're getting so many calls from editors, and within a few weeks, I'm getting like a second call, like, okay, we've like reported the Coolhaus story. Like, what's your next move? It's like, to like make the truck drivable. Like, we were literally trying to just like put the operation together now that we had, you know, this interest. So in a few weeks later, it was still pretty minimum, but it said Coolhaus on the truck. Like you could open the door, like, you know, the basics of the brand. And then we actually started getting calls, and this shows kind of how long ago this was. Our first call like this was from MySpace, RIP. But they called us. They were like, what's it going to cost for an ice cream social like at our campus? Like, we were like, please hold. What should we charge? Anyone know? Like, what? We hadn't even thought of catering, really, you know? And so in those first few years, we really ran what first was one truck and then two as like an events and catering business. And we started expanding to Texas and New York. So a few years in, we've got like this kind of national truck business, which was phenomenal. And it's a great business, especially, you know, if it's an owner operated, like, you know, it's good margins and it's very you know, nimble. Like you can do something and then you can close down. You know, it's interesting, and of course, social media was a big part of that. But we really kind of looked at it and said, this is a phenomenal kind of boutique and very experiential element. But let's also go back and explore the channels that we couldn't in the beginning, which was brick and mortar and grocery distribution, and, you know, see if there's opportunity there. So in the same way, we signed our lease in Culver City. We said we want to have a space that we can really curate and, you know, a home, and for our team too, like it can be an office and a headquarters. And let's try grocery. The grocery thing, I literally wandered into a Whole Foods and I found the guy stocking the freezer aisle, and I said, how do I get to be a brand that you're stocking? Like, that was literally it. People are really so curious about that. And look, different stores change. Like Whole Foods is in a different moment, but it's the same. It's more like you said, like the mentality, I think, of just asking and going for it. And, you know, you'd be surprised how far that can get you.
Okay, what happens?
So he connected me to what was then called the regional forager, very Whole Foods. And Kimberly's job was to really find the kind of up and coming local brands and help kind of be the ambassador for what it's going to take to succeed on shelf at Whole Foods and test the products.
So cool.
And I met with her, and she had an architecture background too. So that was just, sometimes it's just lucky.
Yeah, quick, yeah.
But she was questioning some of my vision, which was I didn't want there to be any difference in the product at shelf than what we were scooping on the trucks and selling in the shops by then. Because I grew up, I feel like, as the child of the 90s, where you saw like these like fine dining brands like Wolfgang Puck. By the time they get to grocery, no offense to them, but it's like, you know, a frozen
compromised
pizza
version.
yeah, and it's cheaper. And I said, I think our generation is too, they won't be fooled by that. Like, people want to have that quality maintained even as you're growing, and people expect that, which is a good thing. So I said they're going to be $5 just like they are, and it's going to be the same recipes and made, you know, essentially in the same way. She was like, that's $2 more expensive than the most expensive novelty. And I was like, well, people can know that it's the best, and we are building our brand outside grocery. So she had her doubts. And then the whole architecture thing, I mean, you know, she was like, helped make it possible, but it also shows you when you're an entrepreneur, you have to hear the voices of the skeptics, like that is important, but you also have to know when to trust your instinct. And that's not ever like, you know, there's no one answer. So we launched at Whole Foods, and it did actually quite well, despite at first horrible packaging that I created. I have no one to blame but myself. Like, I just hadn't not thought it through. And it went well enough that they said, you clearly do have an audience, but like fix the packaging and it will be so much better. So we did, which is another important point. Like, you have to be willing to, like, you know, build.
Take the feedback.
Yeah, like measure it, learn, evolve. Yeah. So, you know, we've grown that business tremendously. I mean, now it's 7,000 doors. Sandwiches and pints. We're launching dairy-free this coming year in 2019. I mean, that business is a $10 million plus business. And I think it could be so much more. So, yeah, that's with a very humble beginning. It's grown quite a bit.
It's so extraordinary. And I love how at every step you had the confidence not to overthink it so much.
Yeah.
Just go to Whole Foods and ask the guy, as opposed to allowing the fact that you don't know an answer to stop you. And then really what that is just an excuse because you're scared or you're afraid you're going to make a fool of yourself.
Right.
And many times along the way, you're like, and I made horrible packaging, or like I put a terrible logo together without going, wait, it's a terrible logo, so I'm not gonna do it.
Right.
You're like, let's just do that because that's what we can do right now, and then we'll get to the next thing.
Totally.
So you've learned so much about what it takes to validate this idea. And it's interesting because you started validating this idea in the office in 2008 when people were just feeling down.
Yeah.
Which again, minimum viable product is like, what can you do with something that's feeling interesting to you? Test it right there. Bring it to work. You don't know where that's going to lead. And then when you met Freya, you just mentioned it, and she's like, that's amazing. And it was just something you were doing in your free time.
Yeah.
I heard somebody say once that it's sort of with success, it's a little bit like an iceberg where eventually what you were doing behind the scenes just for fun is the thing that actually people begin to actually hear about when it's really just a part of you.
Yeah.
And that was so much the story for me with so many of my things as well.
Amazing.
So tell us what maybe we can understand now that you have such an expertise in this. What does make good branding? What were the shifts that made the packaging better?
Yeah.
Why do you think things started to grow as fast as they did? Like, what are maybe some of the things that we can understand about your brand, about the storytelling that you're doing, about the colors, or about the way that you're positioning yourself in the market? And I have a follow-up question.
Well, it's a great question. And I think that I personally love to talk about branding because I think for the creatives and the makers, it really gets to that intersection of the artistry, but then how does that become something, you know, that's economically viable, that people, they want to buy, they feel connected to? What is, they're voting with their dollar at that point for your message and for your story and all those things. So it's a really cool, like, just, there's endless amazing things to talk about, and I think it should be treated in such a precious way as such. So I think there's two things. One is first really taking the time to figure out the like who as far as the brand, you know, like the brand is almost like a person or a persona, it's an identity. And you really have to be deeply in touch with like what it is and what it stands for. It may kind of seem obvious to you because you're doing it and like you've got it in your head, but when you really start to get in there and unpack it, like you'll still have more questions than you realize. Like it needs to be like really just like brainstorm it, like hash it out, like images, words, conversations, like unpack it as much as you can. There's so much there, and don't take it for granted.
How did you do that? Did you make like a Pinterest
Yeah.
board of a certain kind. Before,
Right.
I mean, this is probably before Pinterest was really big.
Yeah.
Did you do like a word collage? Like, did you sit in a meeting and
Yeah.
everybody said like, if this brand is a woman, what's her name? What kind
Right.
of shoes does she wear? Like, did you do that kind of thing?
A lot of different things, I think, over the years, but that's the thing too. Like, it could take time. It might be hard to know completely at first, which is like why I always think it's interesting when like a brand kind of is not even really out there yet, and there's so much like so many focus groups or so many like all that information before it's even out there in the world. Because part of it is I do think just the patience to really monitor it as it evolves, because it can transform and it can mean different things at different point, you know, in its life.
Yeah.
So, but that being
Because it's alive
said,
and growing just like you are.
totally, and it may evolve. I'm very, very close to it as the leader, so it may evolve as you evolve, you know, and that's okay. But I do think having checkpoints where you do some kind of visioning exercise, where you lay it all out, you know, if you're a visual person, do that, like journaling, whatever it may mean, you know, like kind of like just like meditate or have like a stream of consciousness thinking about it. Like there are so many ways to do it, but it is important to stop, I think, at different points and like, you know, make a record of it.
And I think someone who's beginning, who doesn't have the perspective that you have, might not understand why the depth of understanding everything that goes into the story is important. Can you tell us why, through the pores of everything you're doing, that story is what's oozing out and people are picking it up? Like, it isn't that they're just biting a delicious sandwich and going, this is yummy. There is something else happening.
Totally.
And how can you convince us that that is really what's being communicated? Like, what are the ways that you can tell, or what are ways that like it comes through the story?
Well, so a new friend of mine, Sean, who is the president of Goldie Blocks. Do you know them?
Yeah, of course.
Really cool.
Yep.
You know,
it's like girls
STEM for
help girls
girls
like get empowered through building, and
totally
up your alley. I can see why you guys are friends.
I'm really like, I think it's incredible what they're doing. I also think the way they use media is great. But anyway, I was on a panel with Sean, and she said, why would a kid or adult play with a Star Wars toy if they hadn't seen the movie? You know, like first you have to give people the inspiration to even look at your product. If you're really talking about making a successful product,
clear,
right? It like you hear that and you're like, oh, obviously, but like, like what a great way to lay it out. It's true. Like, so you've got to give people the inspiration. That is what's going to drive them there in the first place. And that's what's going to, there's so much more to just the thing then at that point. So the connection is deeper. They then have such a like more rich experience with, in our case, let's say eating an ice cream sandwich, that then it makes them want to turn around and share that with everyone they know, because it's about so much more than just the thing. So if you really want to reach people and you want to do it through a brand, like that is how you think of it. And I think there's just so much more unlocked potential. Honestly, I just think you'll have more fun that way too, because then you're not just stressing about the thing. It's like, well, what's the meaning behind this? And people want to know more than ever all of those things. I mean, growing up again, like thinking of going to the grocery store, I didn't know who was behind these brands. We didn't really have relationships with like the folks at like the checkout counter or in the aisles. Like it was all fine, but like those kind of relationships have changed a lot. Like the average, like, you know, like person at Whole Foods, like who works there, they'll talk to you about what's in your cart, or they'll show you something. And when you're checking out, oh, I love this, like this is my favorite. Or if I tell them like, oh, that's my ice cream sandwiches, and I buy them, they're like, oh my God, like I first tried the truck and now we're so glad to carry it. Like there is a deeper connection with both the workforce and the consumer and the product, like than ever. So
do you feel like when you're creating your avatar for who Coolhaus is as a person, are you basing it on who the target customer avatar is? Or who you really are? Or is it someone else?
I think, well, so to get to your earlier question of like, besides the unpacking of the brand, I think you really have to think deeply about who it is that is going to be, as we like to say in consumer, your heavy user, which makes it sound kind of like a drug addict, or in our case, maybe heavy, meaning someone who ate a lot of ice cream, but nonetheless, the term applies. So like, what's going to be this person that's like really going to be addicted to your brand? and who are they and why. And I think like digging in so much more to like their emotions as to why they eat it. Like we found in like really kind of connecting with that consumer, like so much of eating ice cream is like this moment, like we call this bucket like quiet the world stops, because it's like people like literally their world stops when they're eating ice cream and you kind of like can forget where you are, and it's this like sacred moment that's just relaxing and comforting. It's so interesting to hear about how spiritual it is for people. And also, like, we asked them about, like, why they like that we're women-founded and led. What does it mean to them? Not just telling them that we're women-founded and led, but hearing why that's meaningful. And that's incredible to hear about. Like, they associate, like, first of all, they're like, well, I know if a woman made this product, she's probably going to understand me better. Like, she's going to understand my needs. Or is she a mom and have kids? She wouldn't put anything in a pint container or in a sandwich that she wouldn't give to her kids. There's like a trust or a feeling of they might care more or be more thoughtful. Right. Like all this stuff is going on in their head. It's not just about the tagline, you know?
And how are you communicating those ideas through packaging, or are you telling that story on your website, or is there little hints of it in the packaging?
Yeah, it's very clear on the packaging. It has to be front and center because there's so much, we created like an icon, women founded and led. And we actually found specifically that's even more than women owned, you know, people want to hear founded and led because that tells the whole story, actually who's running it. But it has to be front and center because there's so much noise now and people really need it on a silver platter. So you can have a paragraph. I mean, I don't recommend a full paragraph and we need to fix this ourselves too, actually, but you can have more in writing somewhere, but you have to have something that's like really easy for people to understand.
So you have that on the label.
Yeah, on the website, everywhere. It's all over our collateral.
And then what else is in that wrapper that tells me more about the story?
Yeah, on the package.
Yeah.
We do have like the founding at Coachella story with the truck, and I think just about the ingredients, like the real ingredients, the quality of the dairy that we're using, or in the case of the dairy-free, organic and non-GMO, plant-based, peas, brown rice, and cocoa butter. So you got to speak to the ingredients, and then you have to speak to the how it's made that makes it so good. So that it's the creamiest and it's the best texture and the most velvety it can possibly be. So those are kind of the three big components for us.
It's so great. One other thing that is so important in the story is when Kimberly, you said her name is Kimberly?
Yeah.
When she's the forager, right?
Yeah.
When you were discussing with her sort of how this plan would roll out, she thought it was $2 too much.
Right.
And you didn't apologize for that.
No.
And you were like, let's go with that. It's worth it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't even begin because they're not sure they can put value to what they're giving. A lot of people struggle with letting money into their ecosystem, with not feeling ashamed of being successful or having. You didn't worry about that.
Right.
You weren't concerned with needing to appease and make it the cheapest thing out there.
No.
You were willing to honor it for what you believed it was worth.
It stands for something.
What is that? How could you help someone else to put their shoulders back and know their worth?
So I think the what you're going to value, let's say what you're making it at, like if it's going to be about quality or about the way it's made or the who makes it or any of those things, like then there's a story behind that price point and you just have to tell it, but it will be worth it for people. Like I do believe you get what you pay for generally, so that's one thing. As far as being a maker and accepting like, the economics in general, like you definitely should and do have to get comfortable with it. But I think you have to know what your motivation is. Like for me, it's like we want to succeed and we have huge, huge dreams for Coolhaus. We see Coolhaus being $100 million brand plus. Like I definitely see, I'm like very short of that, But it's not about that. It's about like, what does that mean then at $100 million plus, let's say? Like how many people then are having like maybe what we hope and believe is the best ice cream sandwich, scoop of ice cream, dairy-free, whatever other innovation is in our pipeline, which we have quite a bit, like best experience they have had in their whole lives. Like we have a lot of people write in like, this is the best ice cream sandwich I ever had in my whole life. If we can like, quintuple our brand and beyond, like how many more people are getting that experience and how happy are they going to be? And like, that's if you can like make the best ice cream sandwich in someone's life, that's a really big deal. So like, I'm more interested in like the scalability of the impact of the deliciousness of the product and the message behind it. How many more people are we reaching, especially, you know, women and young girls who can see someone like them made this and they can do it too. So like, that's what excites me, you know, is because you can see I have more of a creative background, and what drew me into the business is like, I can then take this and get it to so many people and impact their lives with the ice cream. That's my motivation.
Well, it's just a really amazing thing, especially since you are just actually said it out loud, because I think a lot of people feel, well, how am I going to better the world if I'm making ice cream or doing hair or dancing or making mugs?
Yeah.
Shouldn't I be in the Peace Corps? And if I'm not, then I'm really just one of those horrible people anyway, who's like part of the capitalist regime. And you so clearly, so effortlessly, there's such a why, there's such a purpose for you behind, it's not the $100 million, because at a certain amount of money, you're living nicely.
Yeah.
Like, what's the difference between
So
staying in
true.
a five-star hotel or staying in a five-star hotel? Like, you're already there. It's now about something for you, showing girls as they're growing up and women as they're taking their place in society as an adult. Look what you can create. And
Totally.
You want not only that, but you see the honesty in a simple transaction of handing someone something that's delicious and knowing that that can make the world brighter.
Absolutely.
I love that. I mean, do you notice that people struggle with like, is what I'm doing enough to put my heart and soul into? Is it really going to make a difference? Do you notice that?
Oh, for sure. And I think you have to know the way that you're going to make a difference. And we're not going to all do it in the same way. Like, what's the way that, with all you have going for you, your skill set, your background, the people you know, that you can make a difference in a special way, and or that you can do your craft and be really nice about it and make someone's experience with that craft better, whatever it may be. Like, those are all meaningful things. There's not only like this one way to save the world,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I always feel like people are just like so busy on Instagram and Facebook arguing about politics or whatever, and it's such a downer.
Yeah.
And it's so unpleasant. And you're busy making ice cream sandwiches, and not only are
we all can agree on.
not only are you happier, but
Yeah.
then every time you make those more available in the world, like, people are busy eating them and enjoying them. And wouldn't it be cool if everybody just spent their time making things that lit up the world?
Yeah.
Like, that is saving the planet.
It does solve a problem in its own way, and also there's a lot of built into it, like making something with quality does make an impact on our food systems. When you source things with equal partner chocolate, with better dairy, when
There's
your
a
brand
butterfly
stands for
effect to all of
something,
that.
exactly. It's funny because in the early beginning days of Coolhaus, we applied to, Freya went to Cornell and I went to Berkeley. And we applied to both schools for like the business plan competition.
Stupid. What's the problem? You can't find someone smarter?
And particularly the Berkeley business plan competition, we had like the lowest ranks of any of the, you know, business plans that were submitted. I think the one that ended up winning was like a watch that like they could like send to Africa to like detect tuberculosis or something. I was like, okay, well, we're not going to be that. And they were like,
crazy.
These girls know where the cool parties are with their ice cream truck. They just didn't get it all. But I didn't feel discouraged, because I know we may not be making a watch that detects tuberculosis and, you know, in a third world country, but we are doing good in our own way. I do think it's social good. I do think the women-led aspect on its own is social good. Again, the way you source things, the way you build your team, the choices you make with running a business do influence.
Also, just you being one person who's happy.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel like we're always worried about like taking care of like the country or another country. Like, what about your own country inside your house, inside this house, if you're just your own body feeling happy? Like, if we each would just take care of our own happiness and be happier overnight, tomorrow we'd have a better world. Like, joy, you know, finding your joy, and then you give other people so much permission to go find their joy, because you went ahead and like put a stake in the ground and said, this makes me happy and I'm going to spend time on it.
Yeah.
And that is such an incredibly inspiring thing.
Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit about your podcast.
Okay, I'd love to.
Yeah, you started a podcast how many months ago? Like,
let's see. I think it was in fall, September. I think we did our first taping
recently.
Yeah,
and it's called From Start to Sell.
Start to Sale.
Start to Sale. So is that about small business and
Yeah.
understanding. Tell us a little about what the podcast is about.
So it's really almost like a forum amongst founders and CEOs, where we're bringing in both of those types of people, with quite a wide range of backgrounds. You know, smaller startup, the Witch Sea episode is so funny. You have to listen to that one. All the way to a friend of mine, Jane Werwan, who's the founder of Dermalogica. So that's like, you know, I think our biggest brand on the show. And it's really about, it's through Vox and Eater, and myself and the other host, Erin Patinkin, are both from food backgrounds, but it's definitely not just a discussion about food business. It's really just about business and what it takes to grow it from the ground up. And a lot of that kind of in between, because I feel like a lot of, there's some great podcast material out there about the startup world, and then about the I've Done It All, which are phenomenal and always worth a listen. But we found there was white space in that middle. Like, what are people saying that are going through it now?
Yeah.
And specifically, what are applicable like lessons or stories or skills that we can share with an audience, so they really feel like they could take that and like apply it to their business.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Tell me, because you already had been doing this so successfully, running a business, starting a business, all of that stuff, but you've been doing the show and interviewing some other people. What are two of the things that you learned that come to you just off the top of your head and you're like, oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
That is something that people could understand to apply to their business. What was one of those things that came out of these conversations that you're like, this is a good take-home message?
So many. And first, let me say that even to just put yourself not in your comfort zone, to be on the other side of the table, makes me appreciate, you know, so much more what you do, because it is a very different experience. So one thing is just overall, it's so important as an entrepreneur to always challenge yourself in that way, because you may feel vulnerable, but when you succeed at doing it, you feel you've opened so many doors and just open your mind, and it's really empowering. In the conversations, got so many things. I really like my friend Piera Gilardi of Refinery 29. She spoke a lot about being about transparency with her team, which I always thought of as more financial. Like when I think of transparency as the CEO, I'm like, okay, I'm going to share the numbers with you and the goals. For her, it's much more about emotional transparency and really giving permission to her team through her own actions just to be honest about how you're feeling, and that it's okay to talk about those things and not pretend like we have to like bottle them up.
Yeah,
and
that's
she's so authentic and like that
sounds like it.
Yeah, and funny, and it gives people like, they then are like, I'm comfortable too. And I just thought that was really cool, and that kind of blew my mind. Jane Werwan, she had stuff about. She actually broke down the whole process of when she has to let someone go, how she does it and why. And it's something a lot of people don't want to talk about. And hearing how she's done it and how she turns it in a way into a positive thing for everybody, like, is so helpful for both anyone who's listening, who's an employee or an employer, you know?
Interesting.
So I loved
cool.
that. She talks also like you have to have fierce conversations with your partner. And like, if you can't do that, then you don't really have that space of like trust and respect. Like, you have to be willing to really hash it out and get to a higher ground.
Yeah,
and I always think
that.
of the fierce. I mean, Fran and I do have our fierce conversations, and you have to, you know.
What does that mean? Being willing to like say what you're really feeling or thinking,
or I think like,
or how important it is to have your partner challenge you. Is that what she's saying?
Like, I think when there's more love and respect, you can argue like more deeply, because you have the security of like. And so as long as that's productive, like, it's so important that you do it.
Yeah, I just heard a friend said to me recently that she was dating this guy who got divorced. Mm-hmm. And he said, what's weird is my ex-wife and I never argued. And then there was one day where she was like, I'm not happy, we're gonna get divorced. And I'm like, because they didn't argue.
Yeah.
Arguing is healthy.
A sign of closeness.
Yeah. And if you can,
especially in the Jewish culture, we're huge in it.
Yeah, and one of you too.
Okay.
But like in the texture, what's being woven into the fight is that there's a different perspective on the table, which is healthy, because then the other person is saying, I want to have influence over you, and you want to have influence over me, and we can help each other see something in a new way.
Totally.
And that is, the fact that you just brought that in is interesting, because it's similar to the other thing that you just brought in from your other guest, which was the transparency of the emotion. Yeah. And so I think it goes back to the beginning of our conversation, where so much of what helps you become successful at anything, it's the spiritual technology, it's the inner work. It's not necessarily the technology of the truck having an engine that works. Yeah. It's the confidence, it's trying it, It's going with your gut. It's testing it and receiving feedback.
Right.
It's walking up to that person in Whole Foods. It's really listening to other people and knowing where you're coming from and knowing what the story is. It's all of that.
Absolutely.
Which I think speaks to, again, it's out of the linear box. I think everybody wants to hear that there's a hashtag that will change your life or a certain way of doing SEO function or a camera you need when you're out on the road for GoPro. And then all those things will put it together. It's not the tangible physical steps.
Right.
And it makes sense that you highlighted those two things because it seems like you're the kind of person who listens to your intuition a lot and has a very rich inner world.
Yeah.
Definitely. Do you meditate? Do you spend time in that inner space?
I think meditation can mean different things maybe to different people, but I'm definitely a very social being, but I do like to really take time for myself. Whether that's, sometimes I walk to my office, it's about a 45-minute walk, and you
That's
can
long.
just be, yeah, you
No
can
one
sort of
walks
be
in
with your
LA.
thoughts. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. It's a very quiet walk because nobody walks. There's like all these fruit trees on the way. It's like a beautiful, you know.
Okay.
I'm like very active. I do a lot of, for me, exercise is huge. I actually went to an acupuncturist for the first time.
Love it.
Oh, this guy, I have to say, poke acupuncture. It was amazing, and like I can't believe it was the first time because I feel like I've been like, it just felt like such a fit.
good.
Like how could I have not had this be part of my life? You know.
Do you do other things to keep yourself creative, to letting in new ideas? Are you painting? Are you drawing? Are you journaling? Are you any other creative expression?
I think, I mean, I do find I still do a lot of design within my business.
Yeah.
The packaging, like almost rarely does a day go by where I'm not involved in some way.
All the time.
All the time,
Looking
and
at color,
much
looking at
more
fonts,
than
like playing.
Yes, exactly. So it feels pretty, but I think it's still great to, you know, even for me, like I have a 21-month-old son, Remy, and he's so cute at night lately, he's very independent. He goes over to his little table, we call it Remy's Cafe, and he has like an Adirondack chair, and for like 45 minutes to an hour at night now, he just sits there and he has his little book. And even just like drawing with him, you know, and showing him the colors. I swear he was drawing our dog last night because he like used the exact colors of the dog, and the dog's sitting right there. But, you know, and that's what's so fun about kids is they kind of like, it gets you doing some of those things again. But I do think, you know, taking time for yourself, getting outside the office, for me, even when I travel for work, so it's still like a business meeting, but somewhere else, I still feel refreshed when I come back. Like I come back and I'm like, I see it all differently. It could have been 2 days. But like you got to get outside of just your work, whether that's travel, reading, whatever it is for you. Yeah. But having you time and then not being ashamed or guilty about that at all, and you know it's going to make your work better. You know, it's the creative journey.
This was such a delicious conversation. I'm so inspired by you, the way you approach the world. I love what you're making. As we're signing off, what do you want to say to the person who's listening right now, who might have just started to feel something, you know, bubbling up in their gut as they're listening, and yet there's a lot to be, there's a lot of breakthroughs that still need to happen because they're excited, but then the self-doubt comes in, or
the breakthroughs never stop. That's the thing too.
That's true,
you know, and I think, and that's the thing of the creative process is like, even when I do presentations on branding or things that are like very much, you know, the artistry in the business space, I still always treat it like a never-ending canvas. Like it's never going to be done or perfect. And to me, I find comfort in that. Like I don't mean that to scare people. I mean that to be like, you're like, don't feel like if it's not there, there's okay. Well, I just need to go until it's perfect. It's never going to happen. Yeah. You know. So keep just like making it the best you can, and that's already, I think, so much greater than like what the going standard is, you know? And I think like, just like take those steps. I mean, I think that so much of fear is irrational, you know, like a lot of people when they're like, oh, are you nervous for this? And you're like, well, what would I actually be nervous about? What do I think is going to happen? That's so bad. And then you're like, I don't even actually know. Like it's very irrational. So like really break it down. And I love what you're saying about just like taking the steps, do this thing, like put it out there, incorporate, finish making it, show what you're doing to someone. I also very much believe like it's all about execution. Like very rarely do like people steal ideas. I actually don't believe that's really possible. And so when I start thinking something is cool, I like really want to talk about it with people and like really watch their eyes and their reaction. Like, are they getting, whoa, they're there with you. And they're like, there's something. And then you kind of keep going with that. Like, I understand like you want to nurture an idea, but also like share it, you know?
Most of the successful people that I've talked to say like, just keep putting it out, talk to as many people, try it, test it. Also, you then integrate it into your own sense of like your solar plexus. Do you even like this idea? Like, how are you fleshing it out? Is it changing as you're discussing it?
Totally.
Amazing. Tell us where we can find you.
So, well, all information for Coolhaus is cool.house, Haus, and our social is at Coolhaus, you know, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, Facebook, and then you can find us in 7,000 grocery doors in every state. So that's from like a Whole Foods to a Publix to a Safeway, soon to be Ralph's here in Southern California. You know, Amazon, Fresh, all those kind of stores. We're also in the Middle East and Asia and the Caribbean with our pints and sandwiches and dairy free coming next year, as I mentioned. And then we have a Scoop Shop in Culver City and Old Town Pasadena and Dallas, and then trucks in LA, Dallas, and New York.
That's all? That's all you could create?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
You're
and a cookbook.
Amazing. Last question. What's your favorite ice cream sandwich?
Oof. It kind of changes depending on the day of the week, but I would say ice cream sandwich. Like if I was going to go for one right now, that dough though, the cookie dough one, it's so good. Chocolate chip cookie, like batter, dough, ice cream, and the dough pieces. It's just awesome.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun.